Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Joe Luca Real Estate Show right here on WNRI 99.9 on the FM dial, 1380 on the AM dial, and of course on WNRI.com. You can listen to us streaming for free anywhere in the world. We are here every Tuesday, 6 to 7 o'clock p.m., and we rebroadcast the show on Saturdays at 1 p.m. So you have a couple of different times when you can catch the Joe Luca Real Estate Show. Quick shout out to G Metz Moving and Storage. I want to thank them for being a sponsor. George was on a couple of weeks ago and did a great job explaining, all the challenges that movers have today, but then also some valuable information that consumers should be aware of when moving their household, scheduling a move, questions you need to ask, because not all movers, not all moving companies are the same. G Metz Moving and Storage. You can check them out at gmetzmoving.com. You can get a price quote or schedule a move at their website. That's gmetzmoving.com. Their employees, their movers are employees. They work for them. Look at their trucks. Their trucks are really well maintained. Their movers wear uniforms. They don't have temporary employees that they get off of Craigslist or any other site like that. So G Metz Moving and Storage. Check them out at gmetzmoving.com. Also, Compass Title and Escrow. They are great closing and title services for buyers and sellers of real estate. Anthony Betancourt and his crew, Christine and Camille, do a fantastic job over there at Compass Title and Escrow, right at Blackstone Valley Place in Lincoln, Rhode Island. And then, of course, public insurance adjuster Vern Rainville. Vern Rainville is licensed by the state of Rhode Island to be a public insurance adjuster, and the operative word is public. He works for the homeowner, the property owner, not the insurance company. So if you think that you have or may have had a claim, even as far back as a year and a half, 2 years ago, you owe it to yourself to give Vern Rainville a call. I've referred colleagues to him, family members, and friends. He does not disappoint because he knows what he's doing. He's been in the business quite a long time. 484-300-8495. That's 484-300-8495. Vern Rainville, public insurance adjuster. So let's talk about some real estate. The market, once again, there is different pieces of information that are coming out. And one of the things I try to do is give you insight, because when information comes out, sometimes it may sound like it's good or it's bad, and it may or may not necessarily be the case. But one thing that is good is mortgage applications are up 80%. So what does that mean? Well, it means that people who want to become homeowners, there are the number of those people who are taking the step of applying for a mortgage has increased 80% since the beginning of the year. That is a very significant number, and that means that these folks are serious about buying a home. Now, not all 8 of those people are going to be able to get a mortgage. They're not all going to receive a pre-approval. But taking that first step is what's important, because once you take that step, okay, let's say you don't get a pre-approval, or you receive a pre-approval, but it's not for the amount that you want, or your payments are going to be higher than you want. It's a start, and you will have an idea of what you need to do in order to receive a quote-unquote better pre-approval, either with lower payments or for a higher amount, etc. But why that's also important is because you can start looking around at houses and get a feel for the market, what's out there, okay? A lot of times people, consumers, they have one thing in mind that they're looking for, and then they realize, oh my goodness, I can't afford a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house. But I could afford a 3-bedroom, 1.5-bath house and a better neighborhood sometime. So maybe I should be adjusting my search criteria, my wants and my needs. And, that's part of the educational process. And Because sometimes, okay, maybe you have a house, it's 3 beds with a bath and a half, but it has a finished basement that maybe could be used for additional living space, for an office. If it has exterior access, perhaps it could be used as another bedroom. So there are lots of different things or ways that you can reach your objective so that you can buy a home, even though it may not be exactly what you initially thought you wanted to have in a home. Okay, what I try to do with my clients, my buyers, is, especially if you have a couple, I like to try and have them each independently complete a questionnaire, so I can see what is important to both parties in the transaction. Okay, both spouses. And the reason for that is because a lot of times, one spouse will say, well, whatever he or she wants is fine with me. But then when they have to write it down, one of them all of a sudden does not want a big yard, or does want a big yard. One doesn't care about a garage. One has to have a garage. So those are things that it's always better to at least be aware of that from the outset. And these are things that, okay, if I'm aware of this, it's not like we need to make a decision with the first houses that we're looking at, whether we want a big yard or a small yard, a garage or no garage, one garage or two garages, because we can start to look at houses and now we can compare and contrast those houses. So, oh, great, a house with a garage is going to cost us $35,000 extra to get that garage, but we could get a house without a garage and have an extra bedroom, or be in a better neighborhood, or have a bigger yard. So now you have to think, what's more important? Okay, the garage, is it integral? Is it attached? If it's attached, how, where does it access the house? Is it in the basement? Is it direct access to the kitchen? So when you come in the garage with all the groceries, you just take the bags out, open the door, walk in the house, and you're in the kitchen, or you're near the kitchen. Two different situations. And of course, what you're looking for, do you have little kids? Do you have problems carrying, groceries up and down stairs? These are things that you need to consider when looking at different houses. And that's why I try to, a lot of the home buying process, it's kind of like an exchange of information that has to happen between the realtor and the consumer, okay, whether it's a buyer or a seller. And sometimes consumers think they know what they want, but then they have to deal with something called reality. Okay, if it has to be pricing, if it's logistics, if it's, they think, gee, I want it to be close to work, good highway access, but then we start looking at houses with good highway access, and oh my gosh, there's a lot of traffic noise here compared to more suburban or more rural locations that are a little bit further away from the highway. Okay. So it's important to really, for me to have an opportunity. I always prefer for buyers to start the process with me as a realtor 6, 12, 18 months in advance, because that way we can get to know each other and we can get to understand the market. And after a while, if you're looking for houses enough, you really, as a consumer, not a real estate professional, you will understand, have a good understanding of pricing and what so many dollars gets in this town compared to that town, in this neighborhood compared to that neighborhood. How does Elmhurst and Providence differ from Mount Pleasant? Okay, how does East Woonsocket differ from the North End? Okay, well, there are a lot of differences. Okay, age of housing stock is one, pricing is another, size of lots can be another, age of streets can be another. And not that one is better and the other is worse, because everyone's situation is different. If I'm looking for a Victorian home, or I want old construction, I would have a better shot looking for that in the north end of Woonsocket than in Oak Grove. It's just the way it is. Those houses are much newer, whereas you have 100, 120, 130-year-old houses in the north end, okay, with the very different feel, a very different cachet when you go into those homes, okay? And I tell my buyers, when you're looking at a home, don't just look at the objective data, number of bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, you have to look at the house and go in and see, how does the house feel? And a colleague of mine, advises her clients to see if the house hugs them when they walk inside. And that, that kind of is the way it feels. I mean, you have to feel like a connection with that house. And that's why residential real estate, for me, is more rewarding than commercial real estate. You can make more per transaction on the for compensation on the commercial real estate, but it's not as rewarding as working with a first-time home buyer couple. Expanding, going from, we had a closing today with a young couple. They have baby twins, and they're making the transition from a condominium to a single-family home, 4-bedroom home, great house. Needs some updating, but solid house in a great neighborhood, great landscaping, etc. Those are the things that are really rewarding for me as a real estate professional. And I try to always be the nexus of communication between the consumer and the real estate market. What's going on in the market, what's going on with houses. And if you ask me questions about electrical service or plumbing, I don't know. I have no knowledge about that stuff, or virtually no knowledge, but I know real estate. You can give me an idea of a house that you're looking for. If you drive by one, I don't have to even go inside the house. I can give you a pretty accurate valuation of that property, making certain assumptions, of course, just based on where it is, how big it is, what it looks like. If we look at the pictures online, and then comparing that to the market data, other properties in the general area that are on the market and have sold. Because I try to make the distinction between homes that are on the market, because those homes that are on the market would be your competition if you're putting your house on the market. Or if you're buying a house, you can look at the homes on the market and get a good feel for what the general quality of product is. Okay, usually it's all kind of within a pretty close band. Occasionally you get some outliers that are really, really nice, the Taj Mahals, and then you get the other ones that are just kind of dilapidated houses that have a lot of deferred maintenance issues. But generally speaking, you have houses that are kind of in the same range. Okay, houses that were built 20, 30, 40 years ago, need some updating, a solid house, maybe it has new roof, new siding, all good things, but it looks like 1998 when you go inside the house. But as long as it's a good location, you have a nice lot, a nice piece of land, the things you can't change, that's good. You can make upgrades to the house after you move in. You can update things, and then you can reap the rewards, financial and otherwise, for that. So, I try to establish, like I said, that nexus of communication between the real estate market and the consumer, so they don't have questions. And if they did have questions, hopefully I can provide answers, even if they are unaware of the questions that they should be asking about a house or a neighborhood. I always, also, when I have buyers looking to buy a house, educate them about the process. After we negotiate the terms and the purchase, the next thing we have to do is get a home inspection. Home inspections are great opportunities to learn about home ownership, because usually the home inspector will point things out that you should be aware of and that you should be doing after you own the home. And then also, it gives you a snapshot of the condition of the house on a specific day at a specific time. So you could have a home inspection on March 31st at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then something happens over the next couple of weeks, and oh wait, something changed with the condition of that house. But the report that you have will reflect what was, obviously not what happened after that. Okay, and then also home inspectors, they can't assess what they can't see. So they can't assess what's going on underneath paneling, underneath carpeting. Okay, I had a home inspection last week for one of my buyers, and the house is completely full, floor to ceiling, completely filled up with stuff. So the home inspector had limited access for what he could see. You know, in the mechanical room, which was also the laundry room, there were literally, big bags, plastic bags full of clothes. These bags were probably 3 or 4 feet tall, piled up, so you could really not see anything, and you're not supposed to move the belongings of someone else around. So you just have to try and work around what's there and see what is visible. In this particular house, they had one HVAC system in the basement, and then the other one for the second floor was in the attic. But it was in such a way, it was located in a position in the attic so that it was virtually impossible to look at because safely, okay, because there wasn't flooring. The roof line was very low. It was really a challenge to, it would have been a real challenge and a risk to inspect that HVAC system for the second floor in the attic. Okay, so they can only inspect and review what they have access to. Okay, and one thing that's changed recently here in Rhode Island is the only state in the country that made this change, is that home inspectors cannot open an electrical panel. That can only be done by a licensed electrician. So if you're buying a home and you want to have the electrical system inspected, you have to hire, in addition to getting a home inspection where they'll inspect everything else, you have to hire a licensed electrician to come in and inspect the electrical panel. So it's going to be an extra expense. Okay, I'm not going to quote prices here, but just you would need to be aware that it's an extra expense. Just like if you wanted to have a radon test or a mold test, those are additional expenses, additional charges, because there's other equipment that's involved, or sometimes it gets farmed out, sourced out to other professionals to take care of that. So it's just another expense that the home buyer has to shoulder when they're buying a house now. And it's unfortunate that the legislature in this state enacted that, because previously a home inspector would open up the panel and look, and they are not licensed electricians, but they understand, if they're a licensed home inspector, what an electrical panel is supposed to look like and what's good and what's bad, and they would make comments. And if it's something that was not up to code, they would advise that the buyer have a licensed electrician come in to further inspect or further repair or make changes. So if there were like double taps, or there were some circuit breakers that were inappropriately sized for the load that was placed upon them, those are things a home inspector would say hire a licensed electrician to take care of these issues. But now they can't even open up the panel. Okay, they can use those little testers that you stick in the electrical outlets to see if the electrical outlets are performing and are wired the way that they should be, but that's it. They can't do anything else with that electrical panel. Okay, so that's something to be aware of if you are going to be buying a home. Okay, and that law just changed this year. All right, it was brand new. So if you bought a house last year, in December, the home inspector could certainly take care of that for you. So that's the next step, getting a home inspection. Now, this particular house with my buyer from last week, this home inspection there are a lot of things that I think are red flags, and I advised my client, the buyer, that they're red flags. And personally, if this buyer were my child, I would advise them to pass on the house as a real estate professional, because it's going to be a tremendous amount of work and time. Not only, okay, we can negotiate the price down for the buyer, but the buyer is still going to have to make all of these repairs and upgrades after they move into the house with a newborn baby and another child. But it's not my money. If he decides, yes, no, I want this house, that's what we'll go for. a lot of times we have to, as real estate professionals, just do what our clients want us to do. Okay, so if they want to buy the house, I wouldn't buy the house because of A, B, C, but my client, he or she wants this house. It's their dream. Great, it's their dream. It's their money. So my job is to get them to the closing table and negotiate the best deal possible on their behalf, whether it's negotiating for repairs or upgrades that were not apparent when the house was toured the first time, looked at, or if something else that comes along, you do your final walkthrough and there's a lot of stuff left in the basement that has to be removed. I've had situations where people move out of the house a couple of days before closing, move out of state, and then we get there with the buyer and the house is full of clothes, old furniture, things like that. And I could be a stickler and say, listen, you have to, get someone here, Mr. Buyer, Mrs. Buyer, Mr. Buyer, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, to get this cleaned out so that we can close. If the buyer wants that to happen, we would have to do that and then push the closing back. Or what many times will happen is the buyer will say, fine, let's close on time, but I need some compensation, to basically pay to have someone remove all of this stuff or to remove it and dispose of it myself. So if that, depending on how much, if it's $500 or $5,000, what is in the garage, what is in the basement, what is in the backyard, those are the things that have to be considered. So it's again, a lot of this is information, and I try to provide information because many times, as I said earlier, consumers, they don't know what questions to ask their realtor. They don't know what questions to ask the home inspector or anything else. It's a tough thing to do, because we have to just do what they want. It's their money, and they're the ones that are going to be living there. So, in short, that's kind of what it is. Folks, it's about 29 minutes past the hour, and you're listening to the Joe Luca Real Estate Show right here on WNRI 99.9 on the FM dial, 1380 on the AM dial. And you can catch us streaming at WNRI.com anywhere in the world, streaming at WNRI.com. And it's free. You don't have to pay anyone to listen to WNRI at our streaming website. I want to thank our sponsors, GMETS Moving and Storage. Go to gmetsmoving.com. You can get a price quote there, or you can actually schedule your move at that website. That's gmetsmoving.com. Also, Compass Title and Escrow. Anthony Betancourt, Camille, and Christine. They do a fantastic job taking care of our clients. Folks, they can take care of folks with all kinds of loans from all different banks. So if it's Rhode Island Housing, FHA, VA, Compass Title and Escrow can handle it. And they even have interpreters. So if you're looking to have your closing conducted in Spanish, Compass Title and Escrow can help you out there. That's Compass Title and Escrow. They're right here in Lincoln, Rhode Island at Blackstone Valley Place. And we're very happy with the service they provide. Also, public insurance adjuster, Vern Rainville. Vern is licensed by the state of Rhode Island, and he works for the property owner, not the insurance company. So I always advise people, whenever they think they have a claim on their homeowner's insurance, give Vern a call at 484-300-8495. That's 484-300-8495. And Vern Rainville, he can help you out, let you know whether, what you are entitled to. And if you have questions, Vern has a construction background, so he understands how things should be constructed and built. And when there's damage, he can identify it. But you have to give him a call at 484-300-8495. Vern Rainville, Public Insurance Adjuster. Even though he doesn't have a 401 area code, he is a Rhode Island guy. He will get back to you within 24 hours. That's Vern Rainville, 484-300-8495. So at the top of the show, we were talking about mortgage applications that are up 80% since the beginning of the year. Okay. And mortgage rates. Now, mortgage rates, folks, they've been, not as low or nor as high as they've been before, but they're still kind of bouncing around. So if you have a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, a conventional mortgage, Mortgage News Daily is quoting 6.71 for 30-year fixed rate mortgage. The FHA 30-year 6.11, VA 6.12. Now these are the top tier rates. So if you are not buying a single family home to live in, if you're buying a condo or a multifamily property, or it's a second home or a vacation home, excuse me, your rate will probably be higher because there are other things that come into play as well, like your credit history, your debt to income ratio, your loan to value ratio. Okay, so if you're getting a conventional rate, 30-year fixed rate mortgage, if you're putting 5% down, 10% down, 20 or 30% down, you're probably going to have different interest rates. And so these rates can, vary, but I use the same website and quote the same rates every week because it's pretty even-handed. Whereas if you, go to one of my lenders, if it's North Point Bank, if it's Embrace Home Loan, if it's Bank 5, whomever it might be, Precision Home Loan, Semper Loans, they all have different programs and different ways of evaluating and assessing the credit worthiness of buyers, and so they could quote you a different rate than the rates that I have here. They may be lower, they may be higher, but what's important, the most important thing when talking to a mortgage lender, a loan officer, is first of all you want to talk to someone who's local. Second of all, you want to talk to someone that has lots of different mortgage products available. Okay, if you go to one of these big institutional banks, they may have one or two mortgage products for you, and that's it. And after you fill out the application at your local branch, you're going to be talking to someone most likely in another state, and then further along in the process, maybe another department in another state. Okay, so I encourage you to work with local people, because if you're working with Jeff Gaccione from Embrace Home Loans, Dave Campagnon from Bank 5, Dan from Semper Home Loans, David Del Bonis from Precision Home Loans, Freddie Almeida at Navigant Credit Union. These are all great lenders. Joe Baptista at Anchor Financial. Great lenders. Their offices are local, so you can go to their office if you want to, or you can upload everything from your phone. They all have the fancy apps that these big national companies have, but you're working with someone who's local. When they go out to eat, they support local restaurants. They shop in local markets. They sponsor local sports teams. So it's always better to go with someone who's local because they're vested in the community. They can sit down with you, eyeball to eyeball, and usually you have a better experience, as opposed to when you're working with someone that you're never going to be meeting them because their office is in Michigan or Missouri. Okay, so that can be problematic. You want to have it be a good experience, and working with a local mortgage lender, in my professional opinion, is the best way to do that. And the thing is, too, they can talk to you about the different options that are available, and you're faced with a name, not just a digital folder with a number. Okay, so if you're like a big savvy investor, yes, then maybe you can work with one of those companies, and you don't care. But if you're a first time, second time, third time home buyer, you deserve to work with someone who will make time for you, explain things to you, sit down with you, okay? So I try to get everybody to work with someone local, and, their rates may vary, the number of points they charge, maybe one or another, and that can make a big difference. So, quick story. I have a buyer. We're under contract. We had a pre-approval from a local lender, Dave Campagnon, and the buyer somehow got, solicited or connected with this other mortgage broker out of Florida, and this individual was promising the moon to my client. And I talked to Dave, and Dave explained this is what's going to happen. The buyer is going to go talk to this guy. The guy is going to paint this rosy picture, and then when the buyer actually sees the loan and what the costs really are, they're going to realize that working with me is better. And lo and behold, a week later, that's exactly what happened. The buyer, there were fees that the loan officer did not disclose because he was brokering it out to someone else, so he didn't know what those fees were going to be. Okay, so he wasn't being deceitful. It's just he can only talk about the fees that he charges at his company, and then they receive the package, the loan package in from the company he's brokering it out to, and those have all the numbers right there. And that's typically where the rubber hits the road, and you'll see whether it is indeed a better, more valuable transaction with that lender compared to a local lender like Dave Campagnon in this specific instance. So he came back. He's working with Dave. Dave is taking great care of him. But that's why it's very important to work with someone who's local. Worst case, you can call them up. You can stop by their office if you have questions, if you have a problem with something. Communication is very important. If someone has challenges with something, or they don't understand something, or we're unaware of something, pick up the phone, send a text, send an email, call. That can make all the difference in the world, because if someone doesn't communicate that there's an issue, there's a problem with something, no one else is going to know. Okay? So that's one of the things we try to do, encourage buyers to work with local mortgage lenders. I'll usually give 2 or 3 home inspection companies that they can choose from, and you find someone that you're comfortable with, and maybe one charges more, one charges less. I literally do not know what home inspectors charge. Okay, I know they charge different amounts for a 900 square foot ranch or compared to a 3-family house or a 3,000 square foot colonial. Those are going to be different fees. I don't know what the difference is, okay? Because I don't get involved. I refer people who are licensed, insured, and provide good services, okay? That's what I do. And I let my clients decide which one they want to choose. So they can call and they can, make their own negotiation with the people and decide where they want to go. So that's the deal right there. And then, one of the next things we do is we place the loan with a title and closing company. Compass Title is a sponsor of this show, so they do get a lot of business. And it's important to work with a title insurance company that knows what they're doing, because if they drop the ball, we're going to have a surprise. And I had a transaction not too long ago where the seller's closing attorney did not learn that there were tax liens against the house, federal tax liens against the house, until about a week before the closing. This is something that should have been discovered much earlier in the process. And that could be problematic, because what happens if the tax liens and the mortgage total up to be an amount that's greater than the price that the buyers have negotiated? If that's the case, there's not going to be a sale. There will not be a transaction. So that's why it's always good. Now, look, everybody makes mistakes, okay? Things happen. But if you're working with a bona fide closing and title company that's worth their salt, they've been in the business a long time, the chances of something like that happening are greatly reduced. Okay? So that's why, when I refer my clients to work with this, choose from these lenders, choose from these home inspectors. This is the closing and title companies that we work with. Excuse me. We have a reason for that, okay? Because they're reliable, and sometimes what's important too is to have the right closing and title company with a particular lender, okay? Some may be more familiar with different types of mortgage product, especially if you're getting into investment properties, commercial loans, things like that. Not everybody is as equipped as as other people, especially, if sometimes there are tax implications. So now you need someone that has a CPA in the office or something like that. So if you have like out-of-state buyers or sellers, or they own multiple properties, or they're doing a 1031 exchange. A 1031 exchange is it's a part of the federal code book, Code of Federal Regulations, 1031, where a seller of a property can defer the capital gain on that property to another property. So I bought a 3-family property 12 years ago. I paid $70,000 for it. I dumped $30,000 into it to rehab it. So my total amount that I'm into the property for is $100,000. And now I want to sell this property, and I can get $650,000. So that's a $550,000 capital gain, because I don't live there, that I'd have to shoulder that tax burden. But with a 1031 exchange, I can defer that $550,000 gain to another property, as long as I identify another property and then close on that property. There are time limits here. Then that gain is transferred to the other property. So usually what people are doing is they're selling one and they're buying something bigger or more expensive. So it works out. Typically people don't go down in size when they're doing it's called a like-kind exchange. 1031 exchange, it's a like-kind. So you can go real estate to real estate, but you can't do a like-kind exchange with real estate to construction equipment, or construction equipment to real estate. You can't do that. So, if we're doing something like that, then we have to work with the, professionals who are experienced in those types of transactions. And not everyone is aware of that. Not everyone has the legal professionals on staff, or even, the business set up to handle that. So sometimes you have to get a couple of different folks involved in order for that to happen. Okay. So working with good local real estate professionals is essential to have the greatest chance of a smooth transaction with little or no surprises. And that's one of the things too that, I've been in the business for quite a while. I'm full-time, I'm full service. And things pop up, and it's my job to negotiate through them so that my client can receive maximum value. Okay. If there were surprises that came up, they weren't disclosed, things like that. My job is to try and negotiate with the opposing party, the seller or the buyer, whatever it is, but to negotiate for the benefit of my client. So if something happened and we need to receive some consideration as a buyer, like we're going to have to do with that home I mentioned earlier, I referred to earlier, that had a lot of things wrong with it, we're going to have to negotiate with the listing agent, but then ultimately with the seller, so that my buyer will be comfortable financially making that purchase. Okay. Folks, it's about 45 minutes past the hour. You are listening to the Joe Luca Real Estate Show right here on WNRI 99.9 on the FM dial, 1380 on the AM dial, and you can listen to us streaming for free on WNRI.com. We rebroadcast the show every Saturday afternoon at 1 p.m. And so you have ample opportunities to check it out. If you are looking to buy or sell a home, I should probably give myself a plug. I work at a company called Remax Preferred, and I have buyers who are looking for single-family homes. We have more buyers than sellers, and so if you're thinking about selling your home now, 6 months from now, a year from now, reach out, because the type of preparations that we referred to regarding home buyers, the same thing is true with home sellers. And I know some folks are listening to this show, and they've been listening for a while, and they want to sell their home, and they're getting things ready to sell the home. So when it does hit the market, there are no last minute surprises. Okay. So if you know of someone who may be thinking about putting their house on the market, or maybe somebody in the family passed away or moved into a nursing home, you don't have to list it right away. You don't have to list it with me. You just have questions. Shoot me a text, give me a call, 401-409-5030. Again, 401-409-5030. And I'll get back to you ASAP. Just whatever the questions are, we can do it, digitally. We can meet in person, whatever you want, okay? You can think of me as your personal real estate Google, or should I say Grok, or Gemini, or ChatGPT, because I will get the answers for you for when it comes to real estate. Okay, and you can also, if you forget, you can Google me, Joe Luca, Luca, Realtor, Realtor. That's Joe Luca, Realtor. And you can find me on Facebook, you can find me on Instagram, you can find me on Twitter, you can find me on LinkedIn, you can find me on TikTok. I really don't do too much with Snapchat because I don't have that much to say. But if you do forget anything, just Google Joe Luca, Luca, Realtor, and you can get all of my contact info. Again, my phone number, 401-409-5030. My email is joe@joelucarealtor.com. Okay. I want to, hopefully you guys can stay tuned, because coming up at 7:05 is the Old Time Preaching Ministry. Rick Murney is going to be here, and it's going to be a nice shift from talking about real estate to talking about Scripture. And Rick does a fantastic job explaining Scripture every week here at WNRI. And you can never have, in my personal opinion, too much Bible reading, too much Scripture in your life, because there are always lessons that you can learn that can make you a better human, a better Christian, and have a better life. So I strongly encourage you to hang around after we wrap up and listen to the Old Time Preaching Ministry with Rick Mernier. So we talked about mortgage applications are up. We talked about what's going on with interest rates. Okay, they're hovering around between low sixes to 6.71 for 30-year fixed rate mortgages. And now home sales. Okay, so we still have more buyers than sellers, so that's something to bear in mind. And again, I want to mention that in addition to all these buyers who are out there actively looking all across this country right now, there right now are 9 million adults between the ages of 18 and 34 who still live at home. They're not all living in the basement playing video games, okay? They're living at home, and at some point, these adults are going to decide they want to buy a house. They want to leave mom and dad, or grandma and grandpa, and go out and buy a home. So those are even more buyers that are going to come into the pool of buyers we already have. So, how quickly is that going to happen? Is it going to be at a rate of 1% per year, 2% per year? I have no idea. But I do know that number of 9 million buyers living at home is not going to stay living at home forever. Okay, that's not how it happens. So, bear in mind, if you're thinking about buying a home or selling a home, there are a lot of things to consider regarding home prices, interest rates. People say, well, I'm going to wait for the market to crash. I'm going to wait for interest rates to come down. I don't see interest rates coming down. I don't have a crystal ball. Let me say that up front. If I did, I would not be in the real estate business, at least not in this capacity. Um, but I don't see interest rates coming down. The only reason we had interest rates as low as we did, you know, in years past is because of quantitative easing. Because essentially, the federal government, the Fed, was printing money. They were just printing money, and that's why we had such low interest rates. They're not doing that anymore, and they probably never will again. We hope. We hope. Because the more dollar bills they print, the lower the value of the dollar bill is. So we don't want them to do that. So by that fact alone, I don't see interest rates going significantly lower. Okay, maybe into the high fives, but I don't think we're going to see 5%, 4, 3, nothing like that. Okay, and if we did, you refinance. But one thing for sure is, since the dynamics of the economic model are not changing, prices are going to stay the same or continue to increase. And again, Rhode Island has bucked the national trend because last year home prices went up 16.8%. Most of the rest of the country that had increases were in the 3, 4, 5% range. Okay, so even though we have a lot of challenges here in Little Rhodey, we're very fortunate that the people that are here want to stay here, and people from other states want to move back or move into this state. So there's been consistent demand for the properties that we have. You know, one of the things I've pointed out is that folks who moved away, they sold their houses and moved to places like Florida, and then they start receiving these huge insurance premiums, you know, and I mean huge, like $15,000, $20,000 a year for a median house, not a big $1 million property. You know, those folks are coming back. Okay, not all of them, but some of them are, and these are little things that make a difference. Sometimes they're coming back and they're moving into, you know, in-law apartments or accessory dwelling units. We've talked about that in the past with Bob Brierly from Calix Builds. We talked about that with Jason Zarambi from Comparion Insurance last week. So these are things that add to the desirability of homes in Rhode Island. And so that means prices are not going to drop. They're going to at least stay the same, but probably in all likelihood continue to increase. I do not believe that this is an inflated market because it's driven by just economic fundamentals, supply and demand. Supply and demand. We have more buyers. Why do we have more buyers? A number of reasons. One of them is because people is paying so much in rent, they can stretch a little more and have a mortgage. Okay. So those are some of the things that, you know, are really driving the market. So if you decide, well, I'm going to wait until rates drop, prices drop. Folks, I've got some clients that have been literally looking at houses for 6, 7 years now, and they were looking at houses. I can remember showing a 1,000 square foot, 3-bed, 1-bath ranch in Cumberland that was $250,000, and you know, buyers that didn't want to spend more than $200,000. I'll tell you, that $250,000 house today is a $400,000 house, and interest rates are higher now. So you're paying more for the house, and your carrying costs are going to be higher. So I would suggest you not delay in buying a home. And this is, you know, pretty consistent across the country. You know, there are some areas, parts of Florida are experiencing downturns in home prices, but you know, most of this country, property values are holding, and around here they are really increasing. So don't delay. At least start the process. You can start the process, and then, and you know, if you don't see what you like, or you decide you want to, you know, move to Tennessee, great. You just pull the plug and you do what you have to do. But at least start the process of educating yourself about buying a home. Okay. The same thing if you're a property owner and you'd like to sell. You're living in a, you know, 2,200 to 2,500 square foot house. You're there, you know, just you and your spouse. You never go upstairs on the second floor. You don't need the big yard or the whatever it is, or the landscaping or the gardens, etc. Talk to a real estate professional, a full-time realtor, and just explore, what could I do? What would I need to sell this for to get what I'm looking for? Okay. How much of a smaller house do you want? Would you consider a condominium? Do you want to be in a more densely populated urban area, suburban area, or a rural area? Do you want to be in Rhode Island or out of Rhode Island? These are all questions, and you can ask, and then you can receive the information. What does that mean? Oh, if I'm looking to buy a home in Burrville and not North Providence, how do prices compare? If I want to go to North Kingstown, how does that compare to a house in Cumberland? Okay, all, different things, different scenarios, and if you're talking with a real estate professional, with a full-time realtor like yours truly, you can receive the answers, and there's no obligation to do anything. Even if you're just curious, start the process. Because you can't do everything on these internet websites, because there are subtleties in markets that even even AI cannot account for. Okay, so only a local real estate professional can really help you with that. Which is why, if someone called me up and they wanted, hey Joe, can you sell my house on Cape Cod? I could sell your house on Cape Cod, but I have a local realtor there who could do a better job because they're closer and they have a better understanding of that local market than I do, because I don't live there. I don't spend my summers there. Same thing with Newport. Okay, those are very different areas. Aquidneck Island, Cape Cod, very different than Northern Rhode Island, different than Providence, different than Kent County. Okay, so that's my pitch. If you have questions, 401-409-5030, Joe Luca, Realtor, RE/MAX Preferred. You can call or text that number. My office is in North Providence. I meet people, wherever they want to meet. I like to meet in my office at some point. But I can help you. I currently have, incidentally, buyers looking. I have 3 buyers looking for pricey homes in the just over the border in Massachusetts. If you're looking at like Franklin, Bellingham, Blackstone, Rentham, those areas, anywhere from 800,000 to $1.5 million. So if you have anything or know someone who is thinking about selling their home, please reach out, 401-409-5030. I would appreciate that. I want to do one more shout out to our sponsors, Anthony Betancourt at Compass Title and Escrow, along with Christine and Camille. They do a fantastic job handling buyers and sellers of real estate with their closing services. And then also G. Metz Moving and Storage, George Metz, gmetzmoving.com is the way to go. And then, of course, Vern Rainville, 484-300-8495, public insurance adjuster licensed by the state of Rhode Island. So with that, I will sign off. Until next week, same bat time, same bat channel. See you then, everybody. Bye-bye. Take care, guys.